I would like to introduce Cory Alpert, who is our chief strategist at Field Team 6. And he worked as the state's director for Pete Buttigieg. He personally knows a lot of the people who are on interesting panels today, including Greta Carnes, et cetera. And he has invited a whole panel of AI experts to talk about AI and the threats to democracy and misinformation. So, Cory, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dale. And good morning from here in Australia. I am currently doing my PhD at the University of Melbourne here in Australia. So it is 9:45 in the morning. So good morning to anyone on this side of the world, and good afternoon to anyone where most of you are. Like Dale said, my name's Cory. I am the chief strategist here at Field Team 6. This is my 4th year here at Field Team 6. I'm really excited to join with you in all of this work. So today we're going to be talking about AI, misinformation, and threats to democracy. So let's start on a positive note. I know AI scares a lot of people, and people can get very, very nervous. About half of Americans feel that the positives of AI outweigh the negatives. And that's contentious, depends what you define as positive and negative. But about 70% of Americans worry that AI is going to make it harder for people to connect with others. We saw a lot of this during the pandemic. And today we have an incredible panel of leaders, some good friends of mine, where we're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about how these technologies are affecting us, how they're going to affect the future of our democracy, and how they're going to affect the future of how we run and elect good leaders for office. As throughout the day, if you have a question, drop it in the chat. Our moderators are excited to help you figure that out and get those questions into me, and we'll get them going. So I'm going to bring up our panelists to the stage, who I'm super, super excited to introduce to all of you. So I'm first going to introduce Leah, who just came on stage. Leah is the Vice President of Programs and Partnerships at Higher Ground Labs, an organization near and dear to mine and Hillary's and pretty much everyone else who's joining this panel's hearts. Leah has over a decade of experience guiding progressive organizations and their impact programs, digital campaigns, and community engagement strategies. She's worked on campaigns in Canada, the US, and the UK. I'm really, really excited to have Leah here with us. Next up, we have Ben Resnick. Ben is the Deputy Director of Tech Strategy at Zinc Labs, where he leads their AI program. And he's a partner at the Truman National Security Project and an advisor to the Higher Ground Labs Progressive AI Lab. You will see a lot of Higher Ground Labs themes here. They are doing great work. And I am reading from a note that Ben is a recovering professional speechwriter, and has appeared in many, many outlets across the US, including the Washington Post. Next up, we have Kemi, who is a senior program manager at the Cooperative Impact Lab. She's been working in progressive tech spaces since 2015, and her imaginative left brain, right soul philosophy leans into her experience as a data engineer, and I just love that phrasing. She is an organizer, especially for reproductive justice, and has a great background in using pop culture and accessible language to break down these really complicated topics. And then one of my dear, dear friends, Hillary Lehr, and the person who, if I'll be honest, put this panel together. Hillary joined us last year and is joining us again this year. Hillary is now the CEO of Quiller, which is an amazing company that we've been trying out and we definitely encourage. They're an AI co-pilot that helps campaigns and organizations to use fundraising content and deploy more effective fundraising content all across the country. So Hillary is an incredible thought leader in how we use AI responsibly, and the person that I go to when I want to have conversations about that. And she is actually the person who encouraged me to go and do this PhD. So very, very grateful to Hillary. And she was formerly the operating partner at Higher Ground Labs. Again, you're seeing a theme. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to go to Kemi, but then I'm going to open it up to everyone else. So can you give us a preview of what you're working on? And again, I'm going to open that up to everyone else, but can you give us a preview of what you're working on, and then the things that you're most excited to see in the next couple of years in this sort of AI space?
Thanks so much for having me on this panel. I actually just hosted a panel earlier today at the nonprofit technology conference on generative AI uses for electoral organizing, so very on topic. At Cooperative Impact Lab, we in general run experiments and cohorts to try and learn more about certain sectors that the progressive community is lacking innovation on. So last year we ran a cohort dedicated to generative AI to really see beyond the hype and the scaremongering of how organizers and organizations and campaigns will actually use these technologies. So we spent about 8 months working with groups, finding out what actually works, what doesn't, what folks are excited about, whether it's off-the-shelf tools and models or crafting their own things. So right now we're putting together reports sharing back to the progressive community about what we learned. And we're also starting new cohorts as well. On our end, we're really diving forward into providing capacity support to organizations because whether folks like it or not, generative AI is here to stay, and it can be that leading edge in really tight competitions. So we're talking about things such as trainings and coaching and support, also things like hackathons that we're hoping to start host, just getting it in front of a lot of folks. We believe that oftentimes when people start touching these technologies, whether through a specialized tool like Quiller or working with a big model like ChatGPT, they find new ways to incorporate it into their work. So we're excited to help seed that into many organizations.
Incredible. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the great work you're doing. And please send those reports along and let us know as we get there, as we get going. Ben, same question to you. Give us a little bit of a preview of what you're working on and what you're excited to see in the near future.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Just quickly for context, at Zinc Labs, we incubate programs related to technology and talent to help Democrats win and keep winning. And on AI, we're in sort of an interesting position because we're not building tech or contributing to tech development directly. We don't have a product or an engineering team. What we do have is a lot of working relationships and trust with partners in the space, including HGL and Cooperative Impact Lab and Quiller. So we're doing work related to helping the space answer the questions. First, what can AI do? And second, what should AI do in politics? And frankly, like Kemi, cutting through both the hype and the fear mongering in the answers. We just co-led a summit with HGL and SAIL on exactly that subject. And we're working with our sister organization, DigiDems, which some of you may have heard of, to test use cases in the field, see what works and what doesn't, and report back best practices and rules of thumb for the industry at large. We'll continue helping other agenda setters in our space align on a broad unifying vision of how to make this tech effective while still being ethical and secure. That vision will definitely take a couple of years to pull into focus and to put into practice. But I'm excited at the prospect, and I'm pretty optimistic at what I'm seeing so far.
Great. And we'll get into that optimism in just a second. Next up, Hillary, let's go to you. What are you working on right now? And then what are you excited about in the near future?
Thanks, Cory. And I'm so excited that you're beginning your program. Way to go. We need that connection between academia and practitioners to really solidify best practices for the long haul. So I'm so happy that you're there. So we incubated Quiller as a partnership between Authentic, which is an email marketing firm, and Higher Ground Labs, brought it to market last summer. We wanted to make sure that we had enough time before we were in the middle of election season to really refine and start to learn how are people using AI in the space and how can we continue to improve that from a product perspective and a best practices and training perspective. So when we first launched Quiller last year, it is basically a generative AI tool made by and for Democratic practitioners for campaign copy. We started with having a generative AI tool that could create first drafts of fundraising emails. And since then, we've expanded to additional content types. So in addition to fundraising email drafts, we can now do organizing drafting for engagement, updates, event invitations, things like that, rewrites of existing emails, SMS, and now we have op-eds in beta. We're starting to work on press release copy, drafts of digital ad copy, scripts maybe for canvassers down the line from there. So I think where we're really kind of heading based on what our early adopters and customers are telling us they need is becoming a Canva for social impact and campaign copy. You train it once on your talking points, if you're a candidate, the issues that you're working on, your platform positions and writing samples. So you train Quiller how to create content that sounds like you. And then you use it to quickly create drafts for a variety of content needs for your team. But they're first drafts. They have to go to keep a human in the loop, someone who can proofread, fact check, and check for emotional nuance, emotional intelligence, appropriateness of response to current events, but just really shortening the time that it takes for that from a 90-minute or 2-hour process down to a 5 or 10-minute process. So I'm really excited to be rolling out new content types and seeing all of the ways that people are using these new tools, the creative ways that people are training workspaces to really get the content that best matches, so that their drafting process is super fast. And I think what I'm really excited to see, of course, I'm really excited about Quiller. I think it can be really helpful. But I think what I'm most excited for is what else people do with the time that they save, right? Instead of spending that starting from a blank page that we all dread, can you launch an SMS program? Can you call up an expired donor and get them re-engaged? So that's what I'm most excited for down the line.
That's great. If you're an organization, please check out Quiller. I know Hillary and her team would love to connect with you. And last but certainly not least on the same question, Leah, what are you working on now? And then what are you excited about in the next little bit?
Cool. Thanks, Cory, and thanks for having me. And this is such a great group of friends and partners to have this conversation with. So I'm just happy to be here, and thank you for showing up for a Convo. So for a little bit of context, HGL, we are an accelerator and incubator of progressive political tech. So we have helped about over 70 companies since 2017. You may have heard of a lot of them before: Mobilize, Ballot Ready, Impactive, Quiller. These are all companies that have been through the HGL orbit. And an initiative that we are working on right now is Progressive AI Lab. So this is the central hub for democratic and progressive AI innovation. We're focused on a few things through the AI Lab. One is funding, and so investing and supporting tools like Quiller, for example. We also put out a bunch of we put out 14 incubation grants last December, and kind of all sorts of different ideas of how we can use AI to tackle really big problems in the campaigning and organizing space. So we're doing that funding piece. We're also doing a lot of programming and training. There's obviously a learning curve and adoption curve in order to effectively know about how to use this technology effectively and responsibly. So we host like an AI summit, for example, with the folks in this room back in DC, and we're doing lots of custom trainings also. And we're also doing research. This is like an emerging and a new technology. So we want to make sure that we are well aware of how it can be used, how it shouldn't be used, performance, things like that. So we have an AI landscape report that's coming out in the next month or so that paints a picture of the progressive landscape, the tools within it, opportunities, trends, how it can best be used, and risks, of course, also. So that's kind of the AI lab and what we are working on. I think in terms of what I'm excited about, I see this technology as this is a generational opportunity for progressives and Democrats to get ahead. And I think we have a moment here to develop and deploy this effectively. We have this term right now around AI companies or AI tools, but I do think there may be a moment in time where we just call them tools and companies, and AI is just naturally embedded in all of them. So I think we have a moment in time right now where it's fresh and it's being developed. So I'm excited about using this moment and taking advantage of the moment together to do it mindfully.
Yeah, I think all that's right. And I think one of the big things that I'm hearing across, excuse me, all of our speakers now is AI is coming, and it's something that every campaign and every organization is going to have to deal with and grapple with. And that's why this conversation is so important. On that note, there's a lot of doom and gloom. People are nervous. They're nervous about election interference. They're nervous about how AI is fracturing things. But I want to go in a bit of a positive direction. So Ben, what's giving you hope in this space? Can you talk a little bit more about how we can use AI for good?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that what's giving me the most hope right now is this incredible spirit of collaboration and willingness to think long term on AI that I'm seeing across the political tech and political ecosystem as a whole. That's never a guarantee in any industry, but especially one as risk averse and incentivized for good reason to think one election cycle at a time as campaigning. But we have moved faster to consider and explore AI, think about how it can be used thoughtfully and effectively in one than we have any other tech innovation in my lifetime. And that is thanks to a really mature political tech industry that is absolutely packed with talent. That's pretty unprecedented. A few years ago, that was not the case, but we've made so much progress in so little time. As for how AI can be used for good, I think this cycle, the answer is clear, and it is taking tedious, automatable work off of your staff's plates so that they can do what people and only people are best at. And that is thinking strategically and creatively and building relationships with other people. That is what ultimately wins elections, not tech. Tech is for enabling that. The number one rule with AI this year is not to try to replace staff with it, but I can almost guarantee you that will go wrong sooner rather than later. But under the right circumstances, AI can already help your team work more efficiently, especially when you focus on solving problems that already exist, including the most tedious responsibilities of your most mission critical staff. I think I'm stealing a line from Hillary here when I say that if you can take someone from a 12-hour workday on a campaign to a 10-hour workday, it has major ripple effects across your campaign and across the entire movement.
And I think any one of us who've worked on a campaign would say a huge thank you to you for helping develop that, and anyone developing these tools to go from realistically 16-hour workdays down to 14-hour workdays. So Hillary, so we've talked a little bit about Quiller, which is expanding capacity for democratic organizations to talk to our supporters. And you're just one of my favorite people that I get to talk to all the time. Can you talk to us about how, like, what's the future of fundraising here? You know, we're doing a lot of that in the chat, and please keep donating. But can you talk to us about the future of fundraising and how AI is changing how we're going to interact with our favorite campaigns and organizations, and how they're going to be able to interact with us?
Yeah, certainly. I'm so excited to see how the fundraising landscape's going to evolve. You know, it's been a challenging cycle. Last year, fundraising was down. The year before, staffers need to create an incredible volume of content to hit the fundraising goals that campaigns need in order to operate. Running for office is expensive, right? So we have to continue innovating in the fundraising space overall. And I think AI can be a huge asset here. One, for the sheer amount of content generation to make that a faster, smoother process, and also to expand the accessibility of best practice content generation to down ballot campaigns that otherwise might not be able to afford the services of a firm that has professionals who are trained in some of the best practices. So I think as we see an overall increase in the quality of email-based fundraising content, there will be some nice benefits there. I'm also excited to see more about personalization. So if we finally get unbottlenecked on the content creation and capacity concerns there, can we start to personalize some of the outreach in a way that makes a donor or a supporter's engagement with a campaign or an organization more personalized, more meaningful, and more fulfilling for the individual who's involved through personalizing some of that content in some really genuine ways? And I think there's definitely going to be a need for discipline if you're using AI generated content to make sure that you're really screening that copy, having it very as an asset to a team that's deploying that to drive personalization, not as just an automated flow, but done thoughtfully. It can be a very powerful experience to have that content land on the issues you care most about, or specific and relevant to the ways that you've been most active with the campaign or organization. And so I think we'll see AI be an asset in the increasing personalization of the fundraising landscape overall, as a way of overcoming some of the ways that giving has plateaued over the past couple of cycles.
Yeah. And I think every organization's seen that. You know, we here at Field Team 6 saw that, you know, and I think a lot of grassroots organizations that sprung up in the 2020 cycle, you know, we're trying to figure out what the future looks like. So you're talking a lot about sort of how we build community. And Kemi, I want to go to you here. When I think of sort of using technology to build thoughtfully inclusive communities, you're the person I think about. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of how you think about that, and how you think about we should build this landscape so that these technologies aren't exclusive and aren't, pushing us into like these alienation bubbles, but how do we build these technologies so that, like Hillary was talking about, we use them to build these really great communities?
Great question. So I'm going to hark back to what Leah just said in terms of thinking about generative AI as this once in a generation opportunity. We have this opportunity to recalibrate who has a seat at the table with this tech, right? We're all new to it right now. And we, especially as stakeholders in this world, get to decide who has a seat at the table, who are the experts, who is the tech actually designed for, rather than just being an afterthought. And these were some of the things I thought about in our program that we put together. I dropped in the chat box a link to our case study for a group that we worked with, Fair Count. And to answer the question that Ben was asked about, what gives you hope, watching the way our organizers were able to build things for what they know their community needs, just by even having training and information. And so I think it goes beyond saying these are our values that we talk about as progressives or in the work that we do, but what does it look like to actually put action behind them, to actually make sure that we're training folks who already are behind technologically on these tools so that they can not only speed up, but fast forward and build what their communities need, rather than an outside entity coming in and telling them, oh, you should try this tech. If it's not built by folks, they notice that difference. And with Fair Count, we were able to build a canvassing tool where they were actually able to get better insights from their communities because they're organizers and canvassers. And so they understand how the data is actually most useful for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And on that point, I'm going to deviate a little bit from the script here just because I think it's a useful question. But Leah, I want to go to you on this question of incubating talent and incubating, the people who are building these, going off of what Kemi's talking about. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you and HCL think about how you're finding this next group of next generation leaders and people who are building these technologies in that space? Because you all have incubated some of the best tech companies in this space, including our presenting sponsor, Civitech. And how are you thinking about how these leaders are coming to you and how you build out their talent? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And love that we are being flexible and hearing what just responding to what's in the room. So love that. I think in terms of the talent and the people we are bringing into this conversation, I think they can come to us from a variety of ways. One is also just not waiting for people to come to you and keeping tabs and building relationships year round. I think in this sense, even though HCL is technically a venture fund, we are also community organizers at heart. And so building those relationships year round, keeping an eye on the ground of what's happening, not just within Silicon Valley and tech, we certainly serve as a bridge in between kind of politics and that tech world, but also within campaigns, within agencies and solopreneurs, etc. So I think this innovation can really be anywhere, and AI can help democratize access to resources, capacity, etc. So I think when it comes to helping build that talent, one very specific thing we did was an open call last December of who is out there building technology or interested in building tech for this. And we structured our incubation grants in a way that paid for time, paid for ideas, paid for all of that process so that it's not just people who are wealthy and have time who can do that work. And we encourage application and did funding for folks from all sorts of different structured organizations or individuals also.
Yeah. And if anyone here has the next big idea, before I go to the next question, I'm just going to ask if anyone here has the next big idea, who's in the chat, who is watching this or who's going to listen to this podcast. I'd love to go around the horn, especially for so many of you work in this space. How should they think about getting in touch with you all? And, we're constantly putting your information in the chat, but if someone has the next big idea, what's the next step? And I'll go to maybe Leah, Kemi, Ben, Hillary in that order if we want to go quickly.
So actually, I kind of wanted to piggyback on what Leah said first, real
Yeah.
quick. Just some additional things I think about. Oftentimes within the progressive world and elections, or not elections, but campaigns, we think of tech and innovation specifically with data, and data is already super segregated. So how do we think about this technology? We're all technologists at this point. We all use it in our world and day to day so often. And so making sure that everyone is trained and skilled up and given the tools to either become even better technologists rather than just reproducing who we already have at front. In terms of getting in contact, I'll always throw my email out there. I'm always down to talk to folks. And I think that we are seeing more things like HEL's AI Lab, New Media Ventures. There's lots of places that are willing to invest and incubate new projects as they see good ones.
Great. Thank you for that. Really, really appreciate it. So the title of this panel is AI, but also threats to democracy. So I want to dig in on that a little bit. I know we've had a lot of questions in the chat about deepfakes. My iPad does a fun thing where it likes to adjust the depth of field there. So we've had a lot of questions about the threats to democracy. So I want to go in and maybe Ben, let's start with you. How do we think about, one, how AI is threatening democracy, but on a more positive note, how do we combat that? How do we find deep fakes? How do we make sure and then a question I want to pitch to Hillary is, how do we build technology in a sensible way so that people are less incentivized to use it in that way? So yeah, we'll start there. We'll go Ben, Hillary, and then if Leah and Kemi want to jump in.
Well, yeah, what I would say, the answer to this is honestly pretty straightforward, and you have to fight through the hype for good and bad around generative AI, and remember that this technology is a tool. I cannot say that enough times. AI is a tool. It is a tool. It is a tool. And like any tool, to evaluate its uses for good or bad, you need to look not just at the tool itself, but who is wielding that tool. And questions like, who are they? What are they allowed to do? What are the norms of what is acceptable? And this is actually a critical moment to answer those questions. This is the year when the norms, what is acceptable for generative AI, are going to be set. So in terms of its uses, like we've been talking about this entire time, how can this allow human beings to function faster, more effectively, or ultimately on the things that they as people are best at? I have a lot of thoughts about deepfakes and misinformation. I think we have like a whole little section on that in a minute. So I think I'm gonna hold my rant back unless you explicitly say I should go for it. But
start it. We'll just roll them all in.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let's talk about the actual risks to campaigns and elections, because my hot take is that when it comes to AI, it's not deepfakes. And I think that this cycle we are trying to put AI into the same role that we put Cambridge Analytica into in the 2016 cycle, where there is this terrifying technology Death Star that is going to destroy democracy. But with a little space and critical analysis on the Cambridge Analytica side, and this is instructive, which is why I'm going to go into it, it quickly became clear that like all of Cambridge Analytica was hype and a grift. Its tech was nothing new. It performed no better than other tools that measure people's words and actions to suss out their preferences. It stole a bunch of data, but in the end, that didn't affect the election. But all of the hype around this tech obscured this less exciting, but more impactful stuff that the Trump campaign did online that cycle. They reached their core audience with messages that resonated, and they followed the digital advertising best practices of the Google and the Facebook employees who were embedded on their campaigns, which is something that Democrats were offered as well, to be clear, but did not make use of. All of that to say, when it comes to Republicans and tech and misinformation and threats, we need to take a deep breath and think critically there is no Death Star, and if any Republicans say there are, it's because they're trying to get more money from donors who are infatuated with tech. And in terms of defending ourselves against misinformation, because that is real, we need to recognize that misinformation and disinformation are not a tech problem. They are a people problem. Republicans were perfectly good at generating disinformation before generative AI. The problem is and has been that there is a group of people so distrustful of institutions, so disenfranchised, and so willing to believe their hot air in the first place. And yes, AI can make that stuff happen faster, but that's kind of like being on the Titanic and worrying about hitting a second iceberg. So the answer is straightforward on this, and it's not technical, actually. Organize, communicate, do that long term. And if you're worried about a certain group being exposed to deepfakes or whatever, reach that audience online and in person first and stay there with them. Be aggressive and proactive and positive and relentless about your message so that when a piece of information comes around, a piece of misinformation comes around, I should say, people's response is, that doesn't sound like them. So bottom line, there is no misinformation tech Death Star. There is no deepfake Death Star. But at the same time, there is no anti-misinformation tech silver bullet. It is no more and no less than a question of movement building, and the shiny new innovation of this cycle does not absolve us of that fact.
Wow.
Cory, can I jump in here?
Please.
Cool. I see a few of us like unmuting at the same time, so love talking about this. Yes, to so much of what Ben just said right there. I think you'll notice that a lot of, even though AI is very hot right now, there's been a lot of new developments around AI, but it is actually not new. Like AI has been around for a while. It's been around for like dozens of years, and it's quietly in the background. A lot of the things that we use day to day, whether it's like talking to Siri or using Google Translate, like setting up ads, buying ads on social platforms, like all of that is new. So I think that the pattern you'll find here as you like dig deeper into this topic and issues, like there are a lot of things that aren't actually new for the space. And I think generative AI especially scales the problem, or maybe scales the solution. But like misinformation, disinformation, as Ben was mentioning earlier, these are not new problems for our space at all. And we've been dealing with this for a very long time. And AI exactly is like a tool as well. There's like lots of technologies and tools out there, and we have choice in how it's used. So let's like start with our vision and values of how we want this to be used. But even looking at like, the same technology that you use for creating deepfakes, you could use that to create like higher quality and quantity of content for Democrats and progressives. If there's like voter access disinformation out there, you can use that for voting rights education. If there's like bias algorithmic targeting, you can use that for multilingual community organizing. So that same tech that is used for malicious reasons can actually be used like exactly the same for good uses too.
I also just want to draw attention in the chat box. Britt Bischoff listed a link to a case study that their organization Red, Wine, and Blue did. They were a part of our cohort, and they were able to create a playbook of fighting disinformation using traditional digital organizing tactics, as well as AI being an important part of creating this new strategy of fighting the disinformation that lives online around abortion.
Amazing. Thank you all for all of that. I know everyone else spoke. Hillary, you good?
Yeah, I think y'all said it so well. I think that we know that bad actors are always going to use the latest and greatest technology to continue their nefarious purposes. And, as malicious actors, there's not much that we can do to control it, but we can call it out. And we can continue to use responsible use cases to set the bar and identify when there are bad actors that are using great technology in abusive ways, so that we can both help identify misinformation, organize around it, continue to employ trusted messenger and other strong defense strategies, but also just continue to make our campaigns and work stronger by taking advantage of responsible use cases for new tools, and thinking through exactly what the ways to responsibly engage with AI are that match our frameworks and values as Democrats. And I think the folks on this panel have done such a great job exemplifying that. I'm really paving the way with a lot of those case studies. So Kemi, thank you for pointing that one out too. I think it's a particularly strong use case along with fair count.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. I'm seeing one question in the chat. I'm curious to see, this one's for Ben. I'm curious to see how you're going to respond to it. And I'm just going to read it out. But doesn't the tool make people more effective at dirty work if that's what they want to use it for? Aren't you making the, quote, guns don't kill people, people do argument about AI? I'm going to pitch that to you.
Yeah, let me read back my response from the comment. That is assuming that the existence of more disinformation equals higher reach of that disinformation, which is actually proven pretty substantially not to be the case over the past 8 years. The vast majority of disinformation stays in these same few tiny buckets of hyper-partisan people online who are engaging with the same content over and over and over and doesn't make it out. Is there a chance that more content can make it out? Yes. Is there a chance that more believable content can make it out? Yes. And that's a real problem. I would point in particular to audio-based deepfakes as one of the things that really keeps me up at night. But for the majority of campaigns, for the majority of the cycle, it's not the primary risk. And the broader thing is disinformation is not intrinsically is about tech. It is about society. It's not about tech at its root. And at the same time, the solution to disinformation is also not tech at its root. We need to be organizing so that it does not land. That is something we have control over. There is no, I'm sorry to say this, effective way to prevent the spread of disinformation online, especially since the major social media platforms completely gave up on that responsibility. We have to figure out how to come to the best defense, and it's not actually trying to play whack-a-mole with every new piece of disinformation. It is making it so that when it arrives, it doesn't land.
Yep, that makes sense. I wanted to get to one more question, but I want to give you all time for closing comments. So maybe if I find time at the end. But I'd love to go around any sort of closing thoughts, especially, giving some hope. Let me merge in my closing question. I'll just pose it as a closing comment plus answer something. How can the grassroots organizations and people who are joining today's summit, how can they use these tools in a way that can help our democracy and help us win in November? And I'm going to ask you to combine that with closing statements to give us sort of a good way to end out the last panel of this incredible summit. Your order on my screen, I'm going to go in, which is Leah, Hillary, Ben, and Kemi. So I'm going to start with Leah.
Great. And sorry, Cory, that was how can we use these tools and closing comments?
Yeah, how can grassroots organizations and activists on this call use and access these tools so that their organizations, and I'm thinking especially about the small community organizations that we partner with hundreds of them to work in their community. How can they access and utilize and get up to speed on these tools?
Great. Yeah, great question. So this is going to be simple, but try ChatGPT online, like chat.openai.com, give it a try. Lots of research shows that people who give it a try are much more likely to understand the benefits of how it works. Also be mindful when you're using these things, these especially free versions of tools, of how your data is stored. Don't upload your contact list, for example, and really examine the privacy policies and data storage policies of these different tools before you use it. But a starting place is having a conversation with the bot on ChatGPT, and that's a really great kind of opening way. I'll also drop a link in the chat later about different political tools that are using and building with generative AI that might be interesting to explore, and feel free to reach out if that is of interest, and happy to kind of talk it through or make introductions also. Yeah, I think my closing comment is, especially with the misinfo angle, is just just be really mindful of like the content that you're consuming online. This is not a new thing whatsoever. Like we should always be mindful of like anything we see on social media, like online, like random websites that we see. I'm kind of using like a guilty until proven innocent model with content of like, oh, is this true? And like really thoroughly fact check it. And then once you like have enough truth in the article and you can examine it, then accept that to be true. There's also like a few different resources out there that I'll post in the chat around like deepfake education and how to tell whether something is like AI generated or not. And feel free to reach out to the AI lab. We'd be happy to chat. We're constantly doing trainings, events, and putting out resources. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Hillary.
Thanks. If I could wave a magic wand or read a crystal ball and look at, a couple years in the future, I think that we'll ultimately have some type of a clearinghouse for commonly agreed upon sources of truth that identify non-consensual generated copy as a way of identifying deep fakes or other types of misinformation, sort of a Snopes.com that's commonly agreed upon as a source of truth. In the meantime, there's conversations about watermarks and other ways, but there's still a lot that's unknown, both for policies, for best practices, and for exactly how generative AI is going to be used in good and bad ways this cycle. But it's going to happen. And so just remember, we have each other. We have a strong offense. We've got great tools out there. We've, intentionally designed Quiller to be easy for down ballot candidates to use, organizations to use. We designed it to be affordable for down ballot candidates. We brought the price to $75 a month. We want people to take advantage of responsible tools. And what we've learned about responsible is data ownership. So you own the content that you create on our platform, and we encourage other platforms to do the same. That you don't have your data used to train other models without your consent. That there's appropriate bias mitigation built into any underlying LLMs as well to make sure that the content that's being generated, sorry, there's a siren, adequately addresses bias that the open internet definitely has. We don't want to be replicating that in the content we create. And then we keep a human in the loop, right? So that there's a person who can analyze generated content for responsible ways to make sure that we're sharing information that's accurate in case the AI guesses. If you're scared of AI, don't be. It's by us for us. It's just the next new thing, as Leah mentioned, try ChatGPT. And if you need a metaphor to describe it to someone else, I just call it a glorified autocomplete. So it's nothing wild. We'll all get through it together. We'll learn more together. We'll set the best practices together. And in the meantime, let's lean on one another, share our learnings, share our use cases, and keep banging the drum of all the ways we can take advantage of new tools and hold bad actors accountable. So Cory, Jason, Dale, thank you so much for including this conversation in today's fantastic training. It's an honor to be a part of it and to help shine a light on this important new technology and how it's shaping the 24 race and beyond. I hope it was helpful. And Ben or Kemi, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Hillary. And we'll go to Ben.
Cool. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for this, Cory, and I definitely feel passionate about this stuff, as you guys could probably tell. I would also echo Leah. Like volunteering on your first campaign, with AI, the best way to start is to start. Just try it out. There are a whole bunch of low stakes, fairly high ROI things you can try to see if it adds value to your work and to your life. And they're going to have a few things in common. They're going to be modular. That is, they're going to fit into your life and your workflow. They're not going to blow up everything you do to learn how to do something new. They're going to be about expanding access, maybe freeing up time that you didn't have before to go do other stuff. And they're going to be intrinsically human in the loop. There's always going to be a person involved. There is no good way to hand over movement building to a machine. Definitely this cycle, probably forever, and it should stay that way. But there's a whole bunch of applications from creating first pass content, maybe creating training materials, to maybe using creating SQL code, stuff like that. There's so many things you can explore, and if you focus on just saving your team and yourself time, That is going to teach you when, if, and how this builds into your life, because at the end of the day, it is a tool. My closing thought there, besides saying one more time, AI is a tool, is to encourage everyone to approach this new tech with a mix of skepticism and optimism. I think without healthy skepticism, we're going to buy into hype that does not help the work. And without optimism, there's no future. And I think that AI is in the future, and so are we. So thank you for fighting the good fight. Keep it up, and we'll see you later in the cycle.
Thank you. And Kemi, to close us out.
Sweet. I will keep it short and sweet. One, I love practical resources, and one that we're working on at Cooperative Impact Lab is a tracker of just actual workflows and prompts and like tools that folks are using. It is a work in progress. It is live. We'll be updating it. Things change, but like staying in some sort of community of practice about what is going on, because this isn't a technology that you can learn once and then walk away from. Things are changing daily. But just other places of like new information, signing up for newsletters, talking to people in your personal life and professional life so that you can be in the loop with what works and what doesn't.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Thank you, Leah, Hillary, Ben, Kemi. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on a Thursday evening for many of you. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to working with all of you through the rest of the cycle. And if anyone has questions, please get in touch with all of them. And thank you all so much. So that wraps up our last panel for the day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for that amazing panel. Thank you to all our panelists. Super, super enlightening to hear people who really know what they're talking about give us their takes on AI and what the future holds. Really appreciate that.